We're going to get this council meeting, Committee on Budget and Audit started here. If we could ask the clerk to please call the roll.
This is council.
This is a special council meeting, and we're going to get started here at 2:06. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Councilmember Ashby, Councilmember Warren, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Hanson, Councilmember Carr, Councilmember Jennings, Councilmember Chenier, and Vice Mayor Guerra.
Here. Thank you very much. If everyone could please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll ask our Assistant City Clerk, Nell, to start us off. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Justice for all. Thank you, Nell. Appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move some items around here. We're going to first start off with the, our mayor's here. We're going to get back onto normal schedule here with our item number one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hold on one quick second while we switch around.
Thank you, Eric. Here you go. Is that yours? Okay. Eric, is this yours? Good afternoon, everyone, and I apologize for being a few minutes late this afternoon, and I appreciate Vice Mayor Guerra you getting us started. Today we have a report back on the 2019-2020 budget. And to start this off, before I turn it over to Don Holm, our finance director, we are not taking a vote today. This is another in our series of workshops, really, leading up to an anticipated vote 2 weeks from today on June the 11th. And this is a report back on a number of the scenarios that I, as mayor, and some of my colleagues on the city council have requested. My specific request is how could we and would we get to a cumulative investment of $40 million a year for 5 years for economic equity. And so that scenario or set of scenarios will be presented today along with some other scenarios. I know that members have lots of thoughts about this and maybe some of their own ideas. And we have a lot of interested members of the public who are here today, and I thank you all for coming. I just want to say one other thing. This is a complex set of ideas and proposals. A lot of numbers, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of how would this actually work. And I just want to say from the get-go, I appreciate my colleagues' patience and I appreciate the community's patience, because sometimes when you're trying to set a new direction or you're trying to do big things, it can be a little bit messy because it's not the usual way of doing things. And so as we grapple with this and go back and forth, recognize again that I think the debate and hopefully the conclusion will all be to the good in terms of the future of our city. Don Holm, if you'd like to give a report.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. During the May 21st budget discussion, council requested that we return with forecast scenarios that address funding opportunities for inclusive economic development. Additional questions have also been asked during the previous budget hearings. We've attached supplemental budget information on the janitorial services and prior bonding to this report, and we'll be forwarding additional responses as they are prepared. City Clerk, may I please have the projector? So as the mayor said, this is going to be a lot of numbers and a lot of information. I'm going to try and walk through it really slowly. I have provided the council with copies of each of the scenarios. I will refer to them as scenarios 1 through 4, and if you have questions, we can answer those questions. So Scenario 1 is basically our base budget, which includes the city manager's proposed augmentations, the 40 million, the transfer of innovation and growth resources, which you can see in the green line. We've brought that into the forecast, which brings you to the bottom line of $59.7 million in available one-time resources if the proposed budget is approved as delivered on April 24th. We're trying to highlight the change from version to version in green. So on this version, it is everything that I just explained, and what we've done now is brought in the set aside of $40 million for inclusive economic development. This would set aside $40 million of the resources to be available for economic development initiatives citywide. Scenario 3 takes a slightly different approach. What we've done is we've separated out the city manager's proposed budget. Below the proposed budget changes, you'll see necessary augmentations for existing programs. While we have augmentations included in the budget, we consider any growth outside of just a normal COLA to be an augmentation. So while our body-worn camera program is existing, to continue that program, there's some base needs for that, as well as for our IT infrastructure, and we can provide more details if council wants. But whatever we do, if we don't include that 4.9 million as shown in 20 and then the 2.9 in the out year, we would have to relook at the programs we do today and possibly make changes. The proposed budget initiatives of the 8.778 are items that the city manager has requested in his budget that don't fall into inclusive economic and community development. So what we did is we took his proposed budget augmentations, capital and operating, and separated them out into necessary adjustments, proposed budget initiatives, which would be primarily those things that we recommended for public safety and for essential core services. And then we've moved the economic and community development related items that we've done since Measure U was adopted to below the surplus deficit line where it shows $72.3 million. So we show that we would have $72 million. Then if we take away the funding for economic development, youth initiatives, homeless housing, and a set aside for the remainder of the $40 million, you would get to how we are showing $40 million investment in economic development, again, bringing us to a bottom line. Councilmember Carr had asked that we bring an option forward that has no red ink in the out years and what that would look like. So what we've done is we've, again, set aside the $40 million for economic development, but what we're showing in the bottom line in green on this version is using our available one-time resources and reducing the inclusive economic development set aside to ensure that the 5 years of the forecast are balanced or at zero for all years. It's about as simple as I can make it, and I'm happy to answer questions.
I'm going to begin with scenario 3, which is the scenario that I know I've been talking to you today and the city manager about. And again, what we've all been doing, just so you know, sort of behind the scenes, is wrestling with spreadsheets to see how we can get to this goal of $40 million a year in inclusive economic development to be defined, and that we do so while minimizing the outtake to the general fund. So what scenario 3 does, Ms. You're still on the mic, okay. I just want to make sure we're having, there we go, thank you. What scenario 3 does is it gets to 40 million by doing an annual set-aside, if you will, every year. I'm trying to look at this line here. Hold on a second. It is called Inclusive Economic Development Set-Aside. Where is that?
At the very last green line, Mayor.
There it is. Yes, the Economic Development Set-Aside. What it would do is set aside between $27 and almost $30 million a year as a set-aside is what it would do. And the way it would get to that number would be could be a combination of resources. It could be the famous second half of Measure U. It could be the Innovation and Growth Fund, which is, we expect to grow. It could be the carryover. It could be any other resource that we can't even anticipate yet that could go into this fund. Why is it only $30 million, between $29 and $30 million, as opposed to the 40 that I call for? Because in the city manager's budget, he allocates about $12 million as a proposal to categories which either arguably or obviously fall under the category of economic development. We realize that if we're going to do this in the right way, we need neighborhood-based economic development coordinators. We need a housing leader in the city. The city manager's budget gives Michael Jasso, our assistant city manager, almost $4 million to lay that foundation. The city manager also includes some other initiatives like funding the CSO program for the police department as a job training program. His economic development budget also includes a variety of new, and I emphasize new and expanded youth initiatives. Not including the pop-ups, because that's going to come a little bit later, but significantly increasing hours to the community center, significant increases to the south and north area, Friday night and Saturday night, summer night light programs, and a whole host of other initiatives. And then he also includes about $950 million for homeless housing initiatives. So,
Thousand.
excuse me, what did I say?
950,000.
950,000. Did I say 900 million?
950 million.
Did I really? Well, sorry, it's not the state of California anymore like it used to be. $950,000. I stand corrected. So that's just so, I hope that I've been able to translate scenario 3 a little bit here. Namely that it is 40 million set aside, of which about 10 plus is already spoken for, at least in terms of proposals, from the city manager's budget under the category of inclusive economic development. Now, this doesn't discuss any form of capital or capitalization. I'd like to turn it over now to some of the members before we get to the public testimony. And I would like to begin with Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor, and to the audience. I punched up and wanted to speak first because the Brown Act, which allows only some of us to talk at any given time, has restricted our ability to sort of forge some ideas here at the dais and compromise. And Mayor, I appreciate what you were just saying, but also just your leadership through this process and willingness to sort of shake this budget process up some to get us to think differently. And Dawn, I don't think I've seen the kind of responsiveness from budget staff that you and your team have shown in a very long time, so I want to say thank you. Nell, do you mind putting up on the overhead? I've been listening very closely to my colleagues and on both sides of this, and also to the public and to a lot of the community stakeholders. And I wanted to suggest maybe that rather than having a fight where some people have to lose and some people have to win, but maybe we chart a prudent middle path here. And so, Mayor, if you'll indulge me for a second, I wanted to offer, I wouldn't call it compromise, but maybe a weaving of the different ideas that have been presented here at the council. And this represents to me a potential path forward that I could support. I have had very strong feelings about bonding because I'm worried about the debt that we would leave for our kids. But I think there are some ways to do this that are responsible. So I wanted to, and it might be hard for the audience to read, but there are a few extra copies down here. I didn't anticipate so many folks. But the architecture of this is interconnected. And this proposal basically, do all my colleagues have one now? Okay, there's an extra up here too. Is basically to lay out some fiscal policies. Don, yes, you need some. To lay
Make
out
sure
some.
the budget director has a copy, okay?
We'll get Don one real quick. I describe this as an architecture for a reason, because as much as I think these are the big overall pictures, the nuances and the details here probably still need a lot of work. And hopefully, after I'm done speaking, if my colleagues think this is a path we should go down, I'm willing to take that input, but I'd like to essentially give this over to the city staff in the end to vet and to see if we can chart a course here to come up with a deal that satisfies the concerns and opportunities that are before us. First, city fiscal health. In talking to our city treasurer and doing some research, we have a debt limit policy. And right now, that policy doesn't have a cap for how much we can dedicate in general fund revenues to debt service. But there is a recommendation and a standard, a best practice that says no more than 6% a general fund should be put towards debt. And that's really to protect the stability of the general fund, to protect the taxpayers. And so I'm recommending that we adopt that 6% standard in our debt policy as a way to, augment for future risk, mitigate for future risk. Earlier this year, I asked that our economic uncertainty reserve, our rainy day fund, which is a cushion against recession, like a savings account, incorporate the new Measure U in its 10% goal. And I believe that the city manager's budget sets aside some funds to begin to achieve that. I think that's an important fiscal policy that gets recognized and adopted through this budget process. Finally, before we go out to bond, that at every bonding opportunity that we would consider, we would pass sort of a fiscal stress test to make sure that we have the capacity not only to repay, but that those investments and that debt do not pose any strategic liabilities for the city. In a big change in my perception and perspective, I am recommending here, Mayor, that we look at $125 million in bonding, broken into three categories. This is in this fiscal year, but potentially double that, so $250 million over the course of 2 to 3 years. A goal of $100 million in affordable housing gap financing, $50 million this year, and once that's expended, come back for another tranche. Those policies for each of these programs would have to be developed, the goals set, and come back to us. The projects would have to be vetted by the City Manager's Investment Committee, the Measure U Commission, and the council to expend those funds. And that's similar to what the mayor's described before as a process. A city facilities park bond. We have a need for libraries and various parts of the city. I know Meadowview and North Sac both have needs. Our city park facilities, as we know, have a huge backlog in maintenance and needs. This would help address that and save some money in the current budget from pay-go. And the final piece is an economic development fund, which could help provide capital resources to important projects. I know at one of our recent council meetings, we invested in the Simmons Center. I see Pastor Simmons. Hi. Nice to see you here. And we invested in the Simmons Center because he needed capital to make renovations on a building they bought. I know the Roberts Family Development Center is looking at similar things. Iceland and North Sac. There's a variety of projects here, both private, nonprofit, and private economic development that could take advantage of this program. But again, that program would have to be worked through and recommended from a policy standpoint and goals standpoint to the council. If you drop down a little bit, you'll see inclusive city investments. Those are ongoing commitments. And those total about $40 million a year, Mayor, which has been one of the numbers I've heard you state repeatedly. Yes. Of that, 13 million is the ones in the city manager's budget for youth centers. 12 million, it may be
12.
Yeah, 12, 13. I did this with my budget book, some paper and pencil, and hopefully as we vet this, it comes together to be more refined. But I want to propose a couple things. One is 2 new programs. One is a city hiring initiative that will give a preference to people living in disadvantaged communities when it comes to city jobs. City and state jobs, government jobs, can be a path out of poverty, a path to stability for families. And I think just like we've done for building projects, we can use our city general fund, and Mr. Carr, you've been a champion for these kind of projects, to help lift the communities that we're trying to help here who experience abnormal rates of poverty, but also a community empowerment grant program that can help, whether it's the nonprofits or community groups, with $10 million a year in grant funds. And when I say that, I know that whether it's ongoing support for Black Child Legacy, whether it's Freedom Schools, whether it's a variety of other programs, we need to guarantee that this is not a year-by-year fight, that these organizations, the Urban League, everyone else know that we're going to keep this commitment every year so that it's not, well, I got this year's, but then I have to scramble for next year's, because that 12 months goes way too fast. And that would be targeted at those same disadvantaged communities that the mayor's been talking about. Out of this, there is now an agreement between the city manager's office and the arts groups on a $2.2 million arts program that includes funding for neighborhood artists. It's geographically spread. It has equity grant programs. That should be included in this, because some of our artists are some of the most important pieces of our disadvantaged communities. Then the bond debt service for the programs above is probably $7 to $8 million a year. To do that initial $125 million, it would come out of these ongoing commitments. Finally, we know that we have unsafe streets in some of our most disadvantaged communities, and we created a program called Vision Zero. Vision Zero is the idea that there's no such thing as an accident, that roads by design or driver behavior create fatalities. And as we did that, we understand that the high injury network, the places that have the most deaths and injuries, largely correspond to our disadvantaged communities. And we want to use these monies to leverage state funds that are now available to fix those streets, to make it safe to walk, to make it safe to bike, or just to cross the street. And we have too many people dying in these communities, and they need some support too. Finally, we are making hopefully some one-time investments. Homelessness funding would come on top of this. I know, Mayor, at midyear we dedicated about $18 million, give or take, to homelessness funding. There are various programs being proposed by council members that fall into the inclusive economic development category. Summer Night Lights is one of them that I'm aware of, as well as Freedom Schools, and that could come out of this bucket of $12 million to help the disadvantaged communities throughout the city. Finally, we're capturing the cost of bond issuance here, and this number would have to be refined for one-time commitments. Finally, there are other things happening in the city that should be funded and are very prudent. So I've left $8 million in the fund balance to go to those other council priorities that help in various neighborhoods throughout the city. There's an art and garden center in South Natomas that I know people have talked to me about, for example. There's a variety of things, and we'd have to continue to work through this list. I don't pretend that this is anything but a proposal. It's an architecture. The details, Ms. Holm, I apologize for adding this to your plate, but I think it protects the taxpayers and the general fund. I think it allows us to leverage investments in our disadvantaged communities. It allows us to build thousands of homes that are affordable to people in either perpetuity for at least a long period of time, decades, and allows us to invest in the other things that I've been hearing about. I don't pretend to know what every one of you think, especially because there are some of you I can't talk to due to the Brown Act, but I believe that the mayor's vision, the council vision, the community vision overlaps in this way, and I just offer it as a path forward.
So I want to respond before I turn it over to my other colleagues. We've had several weeks of hearings on, again, this complicated subject matter, but all with a singular goal, which is to ensure that we commit to sustained investments in our neighborhoods, and especially our disadvantaged neighborhoods. And Council Members Jennings, Gerda, Chenier, and I have been very vocal about where we stand, and some other members have been vocal in some other directions. I want to say to you, Councilmember Hanson, I want to thank you for what I think is a very thoughtful proposal. a very thoughtful proposal. Let's compare apples to apples here just for a moment. This controversial bonding idea, which is actually a tried and true practice. Look back at 2006 when the city issued a $100 million capital improvement general obligation bond without any revenue source to fund significant amount of public facilities. I had proposed up to $440 million worth of bonding. You proposed $250 million. I could happily go along with your proposal because it gets us off to a great start. So I want to thank you for that. You've also added some significant protections, like limiting debt service to 6% of the general fund revenue. If we ever get to that 6% or beyond, we don't go farther. And remember, I had talked about only bonding when we have specific projects, but you provide another layer of protection. The city manager's spreadsheet, or excuse me, one of the scenarios, scenario 3 again, I believe does have that economic uncertainty reserve amount set aside up to 10%. And then your idea of having the treasurer impose a general fund stress test before doing any bonding, I think is also very sound. But you're proposing $250 million and an affordable housing trust fund in this city, $100 million for neighborhoods and $50 million for city facilities. Those who think this is too much of an outside strategy, whether it's fire stations or libraries or anything, you have at least contemplated that. On the bottom half here, in terms of how we would use the $40 million on an ongoing basis, I also think that you provide a really good start here in beginning to think about how we might categorize some of these investments. My only slight pullback on that one is I do think we want to leave it to our investment committees and our advisory committee and ultimately the city council to contemplate in a little bit more detail how we would categorize an investment of $40 million a year. And maybe even over the next 2 weeks, working with you and the city manager, we can come back with something refined on that score. But I think that this really moves us forward in a very significant way, and I wanted to thank you for actually being intellectual about this, and actually getting into the numbers, and putting forth something that isn't exactly what I suggested, by the way, but is very thoughtful. Councilman Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, first thing I'd like to say is that the budget process was an awful lot easier when we were completely broke.
Well, that's true.
So, you know, we have a really great problem here in that we have some revenue to work with and we're not in the red this fiscal year. So that's a wonderful thing. Yeah, I would also like to thank Councilmember Hanson. This is indeed very thoughtful, as is pretty typical of Steve. And he encompassed a lot of the council priorities and goals that we're trying to get to. And I appreciate it. There's a lot involved in this little one sheet of paper here, and it's going to take some substantial contemplation. I would be fine moving this to staff and having them vet this and come back with an analysis of all of these proposals. I agree with the mayor that it takes us in the right direction. Just at a first cursory glance, I would say this, that if we did set a policy of a 6% debt limit, which is not unrealistic, it would also have to include our budgetary constraints at any given time. But even the first tranche of $125 million would take us to that 6%. So while there may be a goal to double it, we would be exceeding that policy if we adopt it after the first tranche was sold. So that's just looking at it in a very cursory way. Mr. Colville, could I just ask you a question, please? So I really appreciate this idea of setting a debt limit, you know, for our city budget. And so, John Colville, our city treasurer, 6%, would you consider that best practice?
I consider that better than best practice. I think it's a little conservative. A lot of municipalities go 8 to 10.
Okay.
And we're
Okay.
at about 3.4 now.
So, Mr. Treasurer, no, Mayor. When I asked you, you said this was the prudent number for
It's a
city
prudent
like
number.
this.
Yeah, it's a number that my predecessors,
So you got to stick the landing if you're going to
Okay.
give me a recommendation.
I'm conservative in
Look at him.
nature. 6% yes is a great number.
So, okay, fair enough. Now, everything's a floating decimal point around here. That being said, we do have this CalPERS obligation, and we have budgetary constraints. So in our talks, you said that 4.5%, given our budgetary constraints, is actually a realistic number at this time. I mean, do you stand by that?
Well, when the conversations you and I have had, and they're great conversations, I look at bonding in two different lenses. One being the debt capacity the city has, and we're below the 6%. We're at about 3.7% right now.
Depending upon how
Dep-
you look at revenues.
If I net out department revenues, was suggested by the finance department, we're about 4.5%, because there's
Fair
certain
enough.
revenues like ambulatory fees that have to stay within the departments that pay their bills.
Exactly.
So we're looking at about 4.5%. The other lens I look at is budgetary, just as you mentioned. I need to be ensured that the city is solvent enough to pay these debt service payments for a 30-year period. I look beyond the 5-year period that the finance department does. I have to look 30 years out. So to go with Councilman Hanson's number 3 of his first bullet is we would have to do a stress test annually before we did any of these transactions to make sure that we can pay this bill, because the city's never
At time of which
not
you-
paid a debt payment.
You would use both lenses
Yes, I certainly would.
in looking at these things for your stress test.
Because the reality is, we will pay our debt service at the expense of services and layoffs.
That's a very important point. Once we incur debt, we have to pay it. And if we come up short, then something's got to give. We use our economic uncertainty reserve or lay off employees or both to be able to pay debt service. So obviously, going into that scenario, you have to be very thoughtful and very careful, hence
Correct.
the stress test.
Correct.
All right, thank you, John. Again, I think that this is a really interesting proposal, and I think that there are things in here that can be very positive for the city. Then moving on to scenario number 3, I have had a problem with this idea of setting aside $40 million annually. Of course, it's all semantics. It's how you look at what comprises that $40 million. In the mayor's budget, there are a lot of items that he's included that I would say absolutely should be included in this $40 million number. The $40 million number, I believe, came from the mayor. It certainly wasn't a council decision, so I'm not sure why that number particularly. But the bigger point is, how much money can we squeeze out of our budget to do inclusionary economic development, to do projects that bring return on investment, that build our city responsibly and at a rate that we can afford without taking on too much risk? That's what we're trying to achieve here in building a budget, so that we can get the most out of what we have to work with and not get overly optimistic, take on too much debt, and get ourselves into a squeeze play. If you look at scenario number 3 with the $40 million set-aside, you see we're in red ink in fiscal year 21-22, and that's exactly the point I was trying to make, is that if you sequester money from the general fund, if you do a set-aside and you take that away from our ability to pay our bills, you can get into red ink, so you've got to get money from somewhere. It could be efficiencies, it could be laying off employees, it could be however we get there, but one way or another, we've got to balance our budget. So I hope that all of you, if you look at our budget and really analyze it, understand that, yes, we're in a good position here with the second half cent of Measure U, but we have to use it responsibly, and we can't incur too much debt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Ashby.
Thank you. 3 different sort of categories of thought here on the front end. First of all, Dawn and Howard and your team, thanks for putting together these scenarios, because I think it really helps, and I see a lot of folks out here who are advocates for neighborhoods, to really look at what you're proposing that begins to meet those needs of inclusive economic development. So the things about the neighborhood action plans and the community-oriented policing and all the different things sort of put in there together, I think those have been overlooked in the film office, the child care provider, the things that have been asked for at the last several meetings that are now included in your budget but have been somewhat overlooked. I think it's really important to see what, I think it's $20 million laid out in here on those items. That is helpful. On Steve's compromise proposal, there are components to it that I think are extraordinary. The fiscal health component, and the 6% number makes me nervous, so hearing him go higher made me even more nervous. But setting some type of debt limit relative to our, not only our general fund, but our ability to pay out of the general fund based on obligations is an extraordinary idea. And then increasing the economic uncertainty reserve on the Measure U funds would help us from another sort of fiscal cliff doomsday scenario. And the stress test is something we have done in the past, so it's not unusual, but to codify it and make sure that we do it every time. I think those 3 points, no matter what we do with this budget, I think we should adopt those 3 strategies. They're smart, good government strategies, and probably long overdue, so really good work. And then to the extent that we would bond, I'm having a hard time, I don't have a hard time bonding, we bond all the time. And most of what the mayor has proposed in terms of how we would take on bonding is what we already do. A project comes forward, we review it, we try to decide if that's what we want to do or not, what our bonding capacity is, and then we move it forward. So I'm not super risk adverse to that. It's in the process of the budget setting aside funding exclusively for that purpose without first identifying what it would be used for so that we can take it piece by piece. I worry about that. I also worry about the long-term sustainability of a $25 million a year debt or $40 million a year commitment. So the idea that Councilmember Hansen has taken these capital investment programs and split them into 3 categories is a good start. I kind of need to understand those a little bit better and timing-wise, how we would work them out, because obviously we wouldn't have 250 in the first go-round. So we would need to figure out from the first sort of 100 how we would handle that, what we would do. And I would want to know on the housing bond with the trust fund how that interplays with the existing SHRA funds or future SHRA funds, which is actually something I know you're keenly aware of, but how we could maximize those dollars by matching and using the brain trust from Lachelle's shop at SHRA. And then I really like, maybe this is where I'm the opposite of the mayor, but I really like the idea of giving the Measure U Commission some tangible things to work on, like here's 3 categories that the council has identified, because in the time I've been here where you're working with these types of bodies, sometimes you can get in a cat and mouse game where we're on one page and they're on another. So if we have sort of put some parameters out that this is what we're looking at now, there would be nothing preventing us from changing those later. Say 3 years from now we wanted to change, just like we have done with the Police Oversight Commission, where we're looking at one thing at one point and something else at another point. I do think giving them some guidelines for what we are hoping to see would help us work in concert with each other. The bottom half of this page is the piece I need fleshed out for me a little bit better. So Howard and Don, I'd like to throw my weight behind where I think I have already heard Councilmember Harris and Hansen go. I'd like to see Steve's proposal fleshed out and in sort of some of the same budget scenario terms that we're looking at here, and maybe a little bit more of a range on the component for bonding, if we could maybe go as low as 5 or as high as 8, which is sort of the window of his scenario. Then that would give us an idea of what our out years would be remaining. If you could just give us an idea on that. Okay, so I think also credit to you, Steve. Great work. A good start. And then the third piece I have here, City Manager, on this item on the agenda, the budget forecast is sort of the main part, but I had also asked a question about our janitor's contract. I asked the question about whether or not the janitors that work for a contractor inside City Hall have to take a $1 or $2 an hour pay cut in order to have health insurance, and you included that in your budget item, but I did not hear a person present. Is there a member of our staff who could come and answer the question that I posed?
Yes, absolutely. This is related to our living wage ordinance, and we're looking for someone here that can speak specifically to what was in the report.
Obviously, I read the report, but it appears to me that the two current contracts, Crossroads and Lincoln Training, both of which come due this year, according to your memorandum here, it says that if health benefits are provided, then they can actually be asked to reduce their salary by as much as $2. So here's my understanding. My understanding is that janitors in this building make $15 an hour. But if they want health benefits, they have to make $14 an hour. And I am not okay with that. We took a vote at this council that I was somewhat reluctant to do in the first place, to switch vendors. And now the janitors that work on contract in this building, in large part, do not have health benefits. And I have come to know some of them personally. Most of them are English second language. Most of them are women. Most of them are older than me and caring for families. Some of them caring for adult children or grandchildren. And I want to fix this today in this budget, and I want to know how it gets done.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Laney Milstein, Assistant City Manager. So the information provided you in supplemental budget information item number 1 indicates that we've been doing this since at least 2010, and we can do the historical research to see before. These contracts are governed by the city's living wage ordinance. That ordinance sets specific parameters for payment based on certain indices so that it goes up every February. There is a line item that states initial salary. If health benefits are taken through our vendor, then that salary is reduced. And this is something that we can work with the city attorney's office. We may need to revise our living wage ordinance in order to implement a change for the next time that we go out to bid for these services. And so that's certainly something that we can look into, but I can't say that it's something that we can effectuate now going forward without doing some research.
So from a long-term standpoint, before we go out to bid, absolutely, we need to revisit living wage, prevailing wage, whatever wage we're going to adopt in the city to make sure that we're taking care of individuals. But right now, there are hundreds of people in this room that are all talking about neighborhoods and commitments to communities and making sure that the janitors that work in this building have health insurance is at the top of that list. It has to be. It has to be, or we're not the city of Sacramento. So to me, I want to know, this budget doesn't get voted on tonight. When you come back, city manager, I'd like to know the delta to finish this contract so that the people in this building that are janitors in City Hall make $15 an hour and have health benefits. So I would like to know what that delta is on the remainder of this contract so we can fix that problem now. And then into the future, we can fix or look at our living wage ordinance. And I know there are some folks that have been looking at that, and I'm fine with that for a long-term solution. But by the end of this budget, I want the ladies that work hard in this building that have been working extra hard for the last year and a half to have health coverage. That's important to me.
Absolutely. We'll bring that back, but in longer term, we could refer something over to the Law and Legislation Committee for the longer term fix.
Thank you.
But for
And
this
then as
budget.
to Councilmember Hanson's proposal, I would love to see it in the digestible format from you and then take that up when we look at these in totality next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Guerra. I'm sorry. There you
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First, again, I want to thank our City Department of Finance staff for helping us weed through the spaghetti here a little bit. And more so, also for the willingness to be, to recognize that we need to be thinking differently about how we budget. I want to also commend Councilmember Hanson here on a very ingenious proposal here. I think it's very impressive. And in the discussion here, I think one of the things that I've been concerned about is how are we looking to be specifically targeting changes that will lead our city into a different economy. The calling out, I think, the catalytic housing bond and looking at the fact that we have a shortage of housing, we need to construct more housing, and there are areas like our commercial corridors that could be great for housing. That, I think, is a unique time to do it because we're leaving dollars on the table that we're going to compete against throughout the entire state for matching funds at the state level, and we don't have an ability to compete with other the coastal cities and Southern California cities who already have programs online, they have shovel-ready projects and are ready to go. So I think this gives us, I wouldn't even say a leg up, just a parity on where we are in the competition for matching funds for housing. So I want to thank you for bringing that piece together. I think it's important that we identify specific money for economic development fund. Again, if we're not creating new jobs, if we're not creating new growth, then either way, whether we adopt the mayor's proposal or the city manager's proposal or any proposal that doesn't look at the fact that our bottom line is going to get to red, whether it's year 2 or year 5, it's going to get to that point. So I think making sure that we're changing our trend and our trajectory to a higher level is critical. So I would like to just be clear in my support that I'd like to see the city manager work with the mayor and Councilmember Hanson to combine these proposals to something that brings us to a point that acknowledges we need economic growth. We have to address our issues of housing, and also all of the much needed programs that you heard a pretty strong support for community programs and the arts. This last couple hearings, I think those are critical. I think the new hiring initiative for disadvantaged communities. I mean, we're trying to encourage more young kids to look at careers in the city. In fact, this Thursday, I'm going to New Joseph Bonheim to talk about careers in engineering, but through water. Our engineers in our water department it's a great career. It's a great job, and we need more diversity in those careers, such as the CSO program that we're looking at now at the police department. And obviously looking at increasing diversity in our areas like our fire department. So I think those are unique ideas that I really want to encourage the city manager and the staff to try to build this next budget to address those issues. Again, I'm glad that we're talking about the stress test. This is something that I brought up earlier on, and making sure that we're being targeted about when we are bonding out, that we're looking at projects that are going to be sound and are going to be productive. And I do like the debt service policy. I don't know if 6% is the right number, but I would leave that up to, I think, a conversation about what our debt service number should be. When I served on the board of trustees for the CSU, we had a debt service number, and that was for the entire system of all 23 colleges and universities. So I think it's important for our city to look at what our debt ratio would be, and again, if times get tough, we can always tighten that debt ratio as well. Lastly, I think it's not lost on me, on everyone who's here in the audience. A lot of community organizers, a lot of support, a lot of folks from labor out here who are saying we need a trajectory that's focusing on economic development, inclusive economic development, and making sure we're honoring the conversation of Measure U to the communities who felt like they have left behind. And even in the past Measure U conversation, I want to thank some of the folks at Sacramento Act who took the time to say we had reservations about supporting Measure U because they felt that they didn't get the support that they need the first time around, and that this is the opportunity to support a proposal that looks at inclusive economic development, that makes sure that we're giving back to the community. So I want to thank everyone for being here on a Tuesday afternoon. All of you I know have other jobs and are here. So that's my direction, I would say, is I want to encourage the city manager to work with Councilmember Hanson and the mayor to find a combination proposal that allows this combination of resources. On the janitorial services, again, on this, I do want to ask our labor relations staff to set an item up on the Law and Legislation Committee. The mayor's office and my office have been working to look at the labor practices overall in our contractors. This contract itself is one issue, but I think in general, our contracting policy should support positive contracting experiences, positive experience. If we're contracting with somebody and it's leading to people giving up their health benefits or even their wages, then there's a problem on our policy on who we contract with. Just like we did for the arena, just like we did for the water meter program, we included there specific things that improve social equity and improve work out there. So I want to make sure that we set that item up so that we can look at all those contractors, not just in your memo here, the Lincoln training, but the Crossroads that doesn't have to come to council for review. And to be clear, Mr. City Manager, is that because of the size of the contract, or why does Crossroads not have to come back to council for review?
We already have that authority from this council when that contract was approved, and the dollar amount on the other contract necessitates it to come back.
The dollar amount on the Lincoln contract.
Correct.
So I think, again, whether we move forward on any contract, all of our contracting policies should support an outcome that's going to also include in that. So I'd like to make sure that we bring back to the Law and Legislation Committee an overall review of all of our contracting policies, and want to make sure that we address this issue, that no janitor should be forced to not have a safe working condition, health benefits, or an ability to make a decent wage, and discussing that wage issue. With that, Mr. City Manager, I think those are the, and lastly, I think I want to make sure that our city staff is working with all of our janitorial representatives out there so that we are making sure we get as much information about how best to craft an RFP for contracts. With that, Mr. City Manager, I think this is a good step forward, and we're making some positive changes.
So to be clear, we're going to come back to the Law and Legislation Committee on this living wage ordinance as it relates to the janitorial contracts. You would like a subsequent action to come forward to look at the rest of our procurement policies?
I think we should look at all our procurement policies. I mean, we spent a lot of time on labor compliance. I'd like to make sure that we're looking at some of those issues, but specifically, let's focus on this one right here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Guetta. Councilmember Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank you, first of all, for your bold leadership as it relates to this very difficult discussion, but needed discussion. And I also want to thank my colleague, Councilman Hanson, who I think really put forward a thoughtful approach to really bringing these ideas together. And I'm really hopeful that between Councilman Hanson and the city manager and the mayor, we will come up with a budget that we all feel good about and that the majority of us, if not all of us, can support. Because the way this was lining up, this was turning out to be quite a fight. And so it is extremely important to me that this opportunity we have is not wasted by bad decisions and bad blood. Because we have a lot of work to do even after this budget. There are a lot of things for us to achieve here in the city. We have a lot of city needs. I've long been an advocate for economic development in urban communities all of my professional life and my public service. You know, I represent a community that has been left behind and that have, from the first day I got here, talked about having a sustainable investment in these communities that did not require us to come back every year and have to fight for dollars. And so it's extremely important to me that we have a strong economic development and inclusive package that is reflective of the ideas that we want for our city, for all of our city, all of our communities, and not have neighborhoods without grocery stores. Not have neighborhoods without safe and clean parks. And so it's extremely important to me that this budget represents that for the health and well-being of our city. In addition, I think that now is the time that we really put our minds, our head, and our hearts together to really solve this homelessness issue in our region. I think this budget allows us an opportunity to take some of the good ideas that we've had and some of the challenges that still exist to really clean up our city, to give people a dignified place to exist, and then to help triage them into a better station in life. And I know that this has been a priority of the mayor. It has been a priority of the city council. All of us are impacted by it. I believe, and I've said this before, and it was somewhat controversial, but I believe that as part of this process of dealing with the homelessness issue, we have to consider a safe ground for homeless people in the city and the region of Sacramento. As part of the solution, it has to be considered. I believe that it will help us to become more efficient and more effective in putting people in a place where we can help triage them until we can get permanent structures or strong shelters or some other more desirable place for them to live. And so this budget, to me, needs to represent a well-rounded approach so that our city employees do not feel neglected, so that our parks are made a priority and they belong to all of the people in the city and they are clean and safe, and also where we can make substantial economic investments into our communities that have long been neglected, in which when these investments are made and the standard of living increases in these communities, wages go up, schools benefit, property taxes go up, which also helps to support the general fund and all of the other things that we continue to want for our city. One of the biggest opportunities for advancement in this city, I believe, is in really helping to improve our underserved communities. And I will continue to be a strong advocate for that. And I'm hopeful that we all have set those kinds of things as a priority, and this council will work effectively to really maximize this opportunity and really make Sacramento, I think, as great as it can be. And so I'm looking forward to the next iteration of the budget, but I think we're making progress, you guys. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Thank you so much, Councilmember Warren. Councilmember Chenier.
Thank you, Mayor. Just at this point, really a few questions and a few short comments. First of all, Steve, I want to thank you for bringing some structure to the mayor's mind.
That's true.
I truly appreciate it. I think it's actually a really, you good?
That's funny.
Yeah, well. I think it's a good structure. I also want to thank everyone for showing up. I hear there was a pretty good discussion about the color of your shirts. So I think you did the right thing. Shows up really well from here. I have a couple of questions, Steve, if I can, just so I understand what you're doing here. And again, I think it's a great direction. And as Alan said, it kind of gives us something mutually to talk through and hopefully build upon. I think it's the right direction to go. First, actually, let me start with John Colville. Sorry, John, if you were wearing a tie, I wouldn't have brought you up again, but it's all right. Can you tell me, so we're, depending on how you classify it, we're either at 3.7% or 4.5% on our debt service currently. What's the increment? So if we went to 6, what can we bond against? There was a question about would we already be over or not. I'm just not sure. What does each 1% look like?
Sure.
Let's see if he gives you the same answer he gave me.
The test.
Things are always changing, Councilmember.
This is your own stress test, John.
Correct. So if we added to the net, which is the 588 minus the 105, so we're taking out the department revenues. If we did $5 million in year 1920, our ratio would go from 4.5 to 5.3%.
Okay, so
And then if we did another 10 million, it would go up to, I need my glasses, 5.58%.
So under Steve's scenario, we're still good.
There's plenty of ceiling.
We have plenty of space in there to do at least 2 years of this at 8 million apiece if we want to do that.
And Jay, maybe I could explain my thinking is partially as and the treasurer will have to actually bring us back numbers on a piece of paper that we can all agree to, because I understand different things, but 1% of the general fund right now is about 5.8 million, right? 5.9. As bonds are redeemed off the general fund, that debt service will drop, and we know next year, if you told us correctly, we'll see a huge chunk of bonds come off.
Because of the convention center.
Convention center, the 8 million.
Yeah.
There's
And other things, parking garages, things like that were bonded out for. So there will be additional capacity in the out years. One of the things that is too wonky to maybe get into here, but we can talk about more, and you know this as the head of the RASA process, is there are bonds off the books that are from the old redevelopment agencies that consume property tax increment that will redeem at a certain point. And so in the out years, we do get some flexibility. It's really the first tranche that probably we want to do strategically, and then in year 2 or 3, revisit that to do the second issuance.
Great.
That was the thinking, just to be strategic.
No, I think that's great, but kind of bottom line is we have enough capacity. We may not have enough capacity to do what the mayor was suggesting at this point, although I would suggest that within 5 years we will, but to get to your 2 years of 8 million and do 125 million apiece, we should be no problem with that.
250 in
From a
total.
debt ceiling capacity.
Right.
From a debt ceiling capacity, yes.
Right, okay. And then the other thing, and I asked our treasurer to take a look at this. Could you give me tell us the answer you just gave me on the present value of if we did $16 million in debt service, what's the present value of that after 30 years?
It's about 5.1 million.
So really a pretty minuscule amount when we're talking about it. It would be far less at that point than 1% of our general fund budget. And
30 years from now,
I
yes.
think 5 million as present value, we can certainly absorb that within our budget. So I'm not overly concerned, and I've been, along with my colleague, Ms. Ashby, we helped get the city to a 10% reserve. We were way below that when we started. We were very fiscally conservative. I think we're at a point now where we've got enough room to do some of these things and take a little bit of risk. So, John, thank you. That was a question that I had to ask on that one. I think, again, this is a great way to look at this. When I've spoken before about this, I've talked about the opportunity that we have to do some very significant things in our neighborhoods that need it most. We have a fundamental decision to make as a council about the direction that we want the city to go. And even though I'm assuming this, if we did something akin to what Steve has put forward, or what the mayor was putting forward, we're still looking annually at where we are, what the overall financial position of the city is, what decisions we have to make. If we hit a recession, we could always back up on something. If we're not hitting a recession and we're doing well and our economy is growing, we can go forward at full speed.
Yes.
So I think that's really, really important for everyone on all sides of this issue to understand. We may, what I think, in a resolution that we might want to adopt, we're being aspirational, and what we're really doing is pointing a direction for the city and telling our community, these are the types of things that we're going to do. These are the types of investments that we want to make. If all goes well, here's the level of investment that we want to do, and working with our investment committee and our community advisory committee to really get the best recommendations back to the council, so as we make those decisions, we're doing it in concert with the community and the needs as identified by the community. I'm really excited about that because in my 8 years here, we've never been able to do that. We've done some very small augmentations in the last couple of years, $1 million here, $1 million there. Ms. Ashby and I went through multiple years of cutting and layoffs, which we certainly don't want to get back to. So my interest in this is, how can we be strategic? How can we take some risk, but retain the flexibility so if things go in the opposite direction, we still have the ability to take care of that and not put ourselves in a position where we have to do wholesale layoffs or things like that. So I'm in favor very much if we want to look at the city fiscal health piece, the capital investment programs piece as well. I think those numbers generally are about right to do 40%, 40%, and 20% into those three categories, more or less. Again, those will be annual decisions, and I would want to really rely heavily on our Community Advisory Committee as we make those decisions. And also make sure that we're doing this and spreading over the geography of the city. We have lots of neighborhoods that are in great need. Some have been very much ignored for a long time, and I would put up the Woodbine area of my neighborhood, which is of my council district, which has really gotten very little. They're not very vocal, but the need there is pretty great. So we have lots of those pockets of areas in the city, in District 1 as well, and a lot of your apartment houses on affordable housing. So I think we need to be really strategic. It's not just by district, but it's certainly by the geography of where they are. Steve, the question that I had was, I'm a little confused about your last two pieces on the ongoing commitments and the one-time commitments. Those are independent of one another? Because I'm not sure where the funds then come from.
So some of these things, first of all, are things that are in the city manager's budget.
Right.
So that's part of why it's important to reconcile what is fund balance, what is in the budget already, and how those add up. But also the city facilities bond gives us some flexibility to move certain things into a facilities bond rather than pay-go. So it's a little bit of flexibility. On the bottom part, Councilmember Chenier, the one thing that we've already done, we used the Measure U reserve, for the $18 million in homelessness, roughly. I think that it's important when we're having a conversation about what we're doing around inclusion, helping disadvantaged and vulnerable people, we show the full picture. And what I was trying to do is show that we can focus in narrowly on a specific question, but I wanted to show broadly the things that we're doing, because we have a great story to tell. I don't think we're telling the full story, and so it's included there. The $12 million for council district inclusive priorities, for instance, the $1 million a year for youth to ride for free on transit, that's what I'm using that number for, and that would be fund balance. And then the bond issuance is also fund balance.
And your 12 is what the mayor's 11 was, between 51 and 40. On the one-time money.
It's sort of, again, this is sliced and diced to piece together some of the things that have come forward through council priorities, some of the things that have come forward through conversation at the dais, some of the things I've heard from the community. And so this is not a magic recipe. These are broad categories that will allow us to sort of work through, but the numbers basically between the fund balance, the one-time funds we've already identified, and everything else should line up.
Okay.
Should. I mean, again, I did this with a book and a computer.
I understand.
And a calculator.
So my request then to the city manager is a couple things. One, in how you display this, which I think you're doing in the way you've done it, if you work it into your tables, like what's currently in your budget, what's one time coming, and what's going forward. I do agree, and having appointed someone to the Measure U committee, who's now the chair of the committee, who I answer to on a weekly basis now, I want to make sure that we do give this some thought. So there are some things here that I know we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. The council priorities of $12 million. As you said, we've already done the $18 million. There's a couple other pieces that we've had pretty extensive discussion on, including the $2.2 million on Creative Edge, which the council hasn't voted on yet, but I know the city manager's been working on that, and I assume you got pretty good direction when we talked about it last time. The rest of the pieces, to me, really, as much as we can leave for the Community Advisory Committee, the Investment Committee to vet, but the Community Advisory Committee to look at, these are we need to be true to what we said we were going to do. We need to make sure that that committee has the influence on this council and the influence on the city that we've asked for. And so I would ask that we kind of create a bucket and probably post June 11th, the council have some discussions about kind of the broader pieces of the puzzle. I know the advisory committee, there's a lot of people there who have to be brought up to speed on what we're doing on the city budget. There's a lot of variance and kind of the level of knowledge of folks, and there's some work that they need to do kind of internally to really understand what's going on, but then give them the ability where we can come back in early fall, maybe, something like that, to start putting out some of these dollars. So I just want to put some of this aside and not rush through it to make sure that we do it right.
Well, can I just respond to that point, because I think it's really important. You are right. In year one, there are going to be council priorities, many of which are going to come under the category of neighborhood equity. I plan to put out the traditional mayor's letter next week that sort of lists $12 to $14 million worth of those projects. Those will come off the top in terms of 2019-20. And then we've got what the city manager has already proposed that we want to support that are consistent with our economic vision. And so this year, there may not be a full 40 remaining, but part of the commonality between what I've proposed, what the city manager spreadsheet looks like here, and what Councilmember Hansen has proposed, is each of them state the clear intent to set aside $40 million every year. And most of that will be unencumbered, if you will. Most of it will be unencumbered, years 2 through 5. And so this is complex again, but let's look at the end result this year. Through the council priorities, through the advisory and investment committees, and through the city manager's proposed budget, we will have tens of millions of dollars of investment towards our communities. That'll be the bottom line.
So 2 more points for me on that. I want to go back to John Wood and be quick, but don't hurry. We need to make investments. We need to show the community that we're making investments in the right place. There's no question about that. But I also want us to be thoughtful, because anything we do ongoing is going to be ongoing and is going to impact the amount of money we have in years 3, 4, and 5 as we go with this. These are, we'll have an ongoing 40 million, hopefully, but we could eat that up in year 1 if we don't do it correctly, where we've made commitments that go out.
Okay.
Jay, can I just add
want to get to... I got one more thing I want to say.
But can I respond to your earlier question? The way I designed this, and again, this is flexible, and the mayor covered it, but we at midyear did not fund council priorities. And so if we delay that to the fall, there are many projects throughout.
I don't think we should delay that piece.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard you saying, so.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go to Councilmember.
I got
Go ahead,
one more
one
thing.
more point.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm
I
sorry.
don't do this very often. So the other thing, and I want to reiterate something I said before, which not everyone agrees with, but I think is really important. We have contracted with 2 firms to look at efficiencies in the city and how we can do business better. There's 2 things that they're looking at. One is kind of savings, which is if we don't fill positions, things like that. The other is actually how we do business. I think that there are some real opportunities there for us. I don't want anything that we do today or in this budget to keep us from really working hard at thinking through how we do business and finding better ways to do it. For that reason, I said this, and Mr. Carr, I know, disagrees with me, but we work together well on most things. If we show, like in scenario number 3, red ink, in year 3 from now, budget year +2, or 3 or 4, I don't worry about that now. I think what that does is it puts the internal pressure back on us to really think through how we're doing business. Because this is really a matter of priorities. My priority right now is the neighborhoods. Let's figure out this other stuff as we go. We will have some modeling, which is the other reason I want to put some of this off a little bit. Not, if we add positions today and we can model it for the next up to 30 years, we know what the cost is going to be, and we're going to have a lot better information as we go forward. But I want us to really feel pressure internally to look at what we do, how we do it, work with all of our employee groups, and see if we can come up with significant savings, which I believe we can. And I know that we are going to have a presentation in July about that work, and I hope that all of you will be here for that presentation as well.
I just want to be real clear. You talk about the distinction between savings and kind of efficiencies.
The way we do business.
The way we do business. And so that's the difference between keeping, for instance, as an example, keeping positions vacant. That would be under the bucket of savings. And under doing business differently, it's similar to like our digital signatures program. We're reducing the number of paper.
I'll give you a better
contracts
example,
that
I
come
think.
through.
I think what the chief has done with our community service officers is doing business a little bit differently, which has not only saved us dollars, but has gotten better service out to the community in cutting the time in half to get an officer there. That's doing business a little bit differently, which has resulted in a positive for the city.
Good deal. Councilman Carr, then we're going to get to the public. We have 49 speakers, and I want to make sure we hear from every one of you. Good.
Hear the speakers as well. First of all, Don and company, what a great job you guys have been doing on this. And I know this has not been an easy time.
Larry can't hear you.
I know this has not been an easy time for you. So thank you for your hard work. Steve, your proposal touches a lot of points that are critical for the underserved, disadvantaged communities. The number one problem in District 8 anyway, and I'm sure it is in some of the other districts, is low income. And all of the other issues stem from that. So to the extent that we can do things, leverage our buying and hiring power in the city to increase income levels, we decrease a lot of other issues. The way we display the budget, I think, camouflages our real intent. Because we display the budget by departments, we look at departments across functions, instead of looking at one function at a time, it's really camouflage to see how much money are we putting in youth, how much are we putting in parks, how much are we putting in economic development, for that matter. So to the extent, Mr. City Manager, next time, I'm not going to ask you to do it this time, to the extent that we can display our budget by function, it would be helpful for the council as well as the community to know how much we're putting into each area. And it will help us to know if we need to reprioritize as well. The second thing that's needed in most of the disadvantaged communities is gap funding. There are parcels of land that are undeveloped, and the developers can't make it work, and there's no source of funding to close the funding gaps to make these projects work, especially affordable housing. So, Steve, you've included that in your proposal, and that hits another nail on the head. The other thing that's needed in the underdeveloped communities, underserved, disadvantaged communities, facade grants, lighting grants, and parking lot grants. What happens is that when the developer builds a strip mall, for example, it's under one management. Then the strip mall will get parceled out and have multiple people owning various segments of the strip mall, and there's no one to coordinate that whole thing. So it becomes very difficult to get facades updated, to get parking lots updated, to get lighting updated. And the same kind of holds true for grants, and maybe this could be a revolving fund, Steve, grants for repairing houses, facades, and front yards and things like that. So I'm looking forward to see this come back in a form that looks like what we've been looking at. And I appreciate the hard work that you've been putting in and the mayor's been putting in. And I'm anxious to hear from the 45 people who are here to speak.
Let's go. All right, thank you. I think you can tell from the discussion here this afternoon that we're actually making some significant progress towards the goals that and the vision that you've had as neighborhood and community leaders, and that today has moved us another step forward. So I hope your public testimony, well, it can be whatever you want. Urge us on. Go ahead, please.
So as the mayor said, we have 49 speakers. I want to remind folks this meeting is being video streamed and can be viewed live or later from the city's website. Members of the public who wish to address the council should have completed a speaker slip, which can be found at the back of the room. These do need to be turned in prior to the beginning of each item so that everyone has the opportunity to address the council. Members of the public are asked to observe the rules of decorum. The council rules of procedure outline decorum expected in the chambers and can be found on our website, copies at the back of the room, and then summarized on the back of the speaker slip. For instance, use of swear words, yelling from the audience, physically threatening conduct, and displays of disrespect are discouraged. The presiding officer will request that a person cease disruptive conduct, and if not immediately stopped, the presiding officer will direct the person to leave the council meeting. Each speaker does have 2 minutes to address the council. Please silence your cell phones or other communication devices. A cordless microphone, assisted listening device, and parking invalidations are available from the clerk. So I will read off a few at a time. The first is Chet Hewitt, Pastor Les Simons, Rachel Rios, and Ray Green. Simmons, excuse me.
It's okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. Pastor Simmons and I are going to present here together because for the sake of time, we think we can actually do that. I want to hear with business leaders, leaders from the philanthropic community, community nonprofits, and businesses, and I know that you have seen these coalitions before. But we're also here with some new members who have joined our coalition, including the Sacramento area realtors, the pipe fitters, as well as the electrical workers as well. I'd like everyone who's in the audience, who's here in support of Measure U investments in communities to please stand up.
Thank you for coming.
I'll just make a few brief points before I turn it over to my partner. That's good, because you all should be standing. A few points before I turn the lectern over to my colleague, Les Simmons. I want to thank all of our partners for being here today and for doing the hard work that actually led to Measure U getting passed. There's been a lot of talk about the city being in good fiscal conditions because of Measure U. Well, we paid for it. Yeah. And I think that you need to understand that we contribute to that reality in important and powerful ways. We know there are many things that need to be supported and paid for in this city. We'll all agree with that, but we know that communities need to be invested in as well. 2 points that I'd like to make. One is I appreciate the conversation about kind of fiscal integrity and soundness. But to be intact fiscally and to be morally broken is not an outcome that you should want to see the city pursue as well. And we have got to ensure that our young people and seniors and communities that have been left behind have the resources and opportunities they need to continue to have viable, healthy lives in the communities in which they live. Councilmember Ashby, I appreciate your calling out what's happening with some of the workers in this building with the lack of health
Thank you for your
access.
comments. Your 2 minutes is
But I'll
complete.
also say that, what's really important is that inequity of any type, in any region, in this building and beyond it, is something you need to address.
Your 2 minutes is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Chet. Thank you so much.
So in continuing on from what Chet Hewitt lifted up, we definitely are supportive of what you talked about, Councilmember Ashby, and I also want to thank Steve Hansen for really laying out some ingredients to build what we have all talked about, inclusive economic development. A few months ago, Mr. Mayor, you came down, did the city address over in South Sac, Meadowview, and me and a few colleagues of mine, we rode our jump scooters that we bought by ourselves down there, really representing the whole idea of bringing the Renaissance from Midtown and from downtown to our communities as well. We feel this budget does that. Along with the 20,000 residents that my fellow colleagues went door to door and knocked on 20,000 doors to get them to see who was supportive of Measure U, which they ultimately supported. And then in District 8, Councilmember Carr, knowing that in every precinct in District 8 was a huge turnout to support Measure U, I think we find ourselves at a powerful place today. We find ourselves at a moment of great opportunity, a moment of great ability to dream up a future that's inclusive of all of our communities and all of the concerns of all the city officials and city employees as well. So I think it's a great day. We want to thank both you, Mayor, and the council and city manager for creating a budget that's inclusive of our communities communities as well. Also like to thank all of our community partners and friends that are joining with me from our faith-based community, from community organizations, from all of us standing together. This is what collective impact looks like. This is what shared interest looks like. And we get to share in that success for generations to come as we continue to move forward with this budget. Thank you so much.
Good
Rachel
afternoon,
Rios, then
Council.
Ray Green.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Rachel Rios. I'm the Director of La Familia Counseling Center. And I had all of these comments prepared, but I got to say that I've been very encouraged today by the willingness to work together and to put together a project and a budget that really works for all of our community. The conversation should never have been framed between community and youth and our peace officers or our first responders, because we need them both. They are both our priority. And so I'm very happy to see that you're willing to work together. You know, an inclusive economic development program is not just about revitalizing buildings. It's about revitalizing relationships and revitalizing our communities, and that's so important for communities that have yet to be served. You've shown leadership by investing in our young people in the pop-ups, but that's the first step. That opened the door for us to actually work with those young people, for community agencies to engage with those young people, and now we need to do the next step, which is to invest in their success by helping them with workforce development, by helping them with career development, by helping them be successful. And that's what the economic development is. There are many wonderful projects that are being vetted. We hope that you'll look at those projects that invest in communities that have not had investment for many years. And so with that, I just wanted to say one thing. I looked up on your website, and your Neighborhood Services Division has a vision that says that you will be a national model for its innovation and empowerment of communities to actively develop, revitalize, and maintain healthy communities. We believe in that, so let's do it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Kevin Ross with Unity of Sacramento and Sacramento Act. We are turning a page in a very dark and very polarized recent history. And what I would like to propose today is that we embrace this opportunity to look at this as a paradigm shift for how community and this council engages with each other. That rather than there being this us versus them history that we have experienced over and over again, that we look at disinvested communities, marginalized communities as our community and our Sacramento, and reimagine our relationship being those not pulling against each other in this, what do you call it? A tug of war between each other. That's been the dynamic that we've had. But perhaps all of us pulling together on the same rope, pulling these communities that have been disenfranchised out together. And this is what Measure U represents for us, and I hope that we can have the trust that the grip that we hold on a rope together that pulls Sacramento out of the shame that we've been in over the last year or more. Thank you.
Reverend Ross.
Ray Green is the next speaker.
All right, to the mayor, the city, council members, we want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on behalf of our youth, but also community and trusted individuals who are really making change in the community. And I want to first add that trust factor with the expectation of having us go out, knock, and to support Measure U. This is your moment. This is your moment to truly stand by what you said for our sake, for our youth's sake, and for our community's sake. Today I have two young men who will speak on their behalf from the youth's perspective, but this is truly our opportunity. Today you see us as faith leaders, businesses, youth, and community development standing together in a committed front, not asking but demanding, which we shouldn't have to, because our youth deserve this opportunity. The youth deserve the resources that they have and that they need. So we stand together for an inclusive economic development for all of our communities, especially for those who have been left behind. Many of you walk the streets, and we all say that we're for and we're about youth. And my youth are going to stand here today to ask you, will you stand with us to be that, not just talk, but actually walk it out? Thank you.
This is Maharani Paul and Fabiani.
I'm sorry, our youth are going to speak. We still had 35 seconds. We still had 35 seconds, yes.
No, that's okay. We'll give the young people the time. Did they sign cards? Did they?
They came up with me, yeah.
If you didn't, okay, then I'm going to make an exception for the young people. Go ahead, take the time now.
I do have 49 speakers, and so I do need to call people up in order. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Julius. Hello, my name is Marvell, and I'm the captain of the Kings and Queens Rise basketball team. And
I speak a little louder, you guys. Thank you.
we represent the youth of Del Paso, and we just wanted to let you know that it's hard growing up in the hood because, you know, we don't really have resources like that. We don't really have people on our side, you know? And it's hard knowing that you guys aren't going to be there for us. And, you know, so basically, you know, growing up, my mother, she always told me, do you hear me? I would nod yes. And then she asked me again, no, do you hear me? So with all due respect, I'm asking you right now, do you hear us?
Yes.
Are you going to stand by us?
Yes.
That's 35 seconds.
Thank you.
The next speaker I've signed up to speak is Maharayi Paul and Fabienne Caldron, then Desiree Barahona, then Jackie Rose.
Good afternoon. I'm usually not comfortable speaking in these types of situations, but I was asked to encourage you to support the community pop-ups as part of the inclusive economic strategy approach to investing in our neighborhoods. My name is Mahari Paul, and I have been a part of the Roberts Family Development Center since I was an 8th grader at Martin Luther King Junior High School in North Sacramento. I am also a proud graduate of Grant High School class of 2018, where I belong to the Mayor's 1,000 Strong Internship Program, which led to me working on the Nightlife Turned Right summer staff, and now as a staff member with the Roberts Family Development Center's after school staff, and this summer's a member of the Freedom School staff. One of my assignments since January has also been a member of the RFDC pop-up team, where every Friday night I am able to give back to my neighborhood youth in a way it was originally given to me. As a 19-year-old, I'm not too old to have forgotten that these activities and job opportunities I told you about kept me safe and out of trouble. I stand before you as a reason you should continue to support the pop-ups, but more importantly, as a reason to support community organizations like Roberts Family Development Center. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fabiana. I'm 17 and I go to school in the Twin Rivers Unified District. I've been volunteering with La Familia for around 3 years now, and I can't thank them enough for all the opportunities they've given me. From volunteering at community events such as pop-ups and the Big Day of Giving to being able to speak in front of you today. This agency has helped me develop the necessary skills to be career ready and personally confident. Because of these youth development opportunities, I was able to secure my first summer job. I feel that I now have the skills and confidence to be successful at it. I hope that by seeing all the youth that have attended today, you will continue to fund and support these investments in our community because it truly does make a difference.
Next speaker is Desiree Barahona, Jackie Rose, then Deborah Cummings.
Hi, my name is Dana Maisha. I'm here representing Escape Velocity, Voice of the Youth, and Boys in the Hood. And I'm here to speak to the power of youth impact with regard to the community pop-ups. I grew up in the 80s in Hunters Point, which is an area in San Francisco that was pretty rough. And we had similar programming. And I want to say that that provided me the opportunity to have a 30-plus career with the federal government. And the youth development portion should not be underestimated. It has a huge impact.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Barahona, and I'm here on behalf of La Familia Counseling Center. And I've been fortunate to be part of our youth development team that has been running the pop-ups since January. We have seen how much our community was hungry for these types of events. They show up by the numbers week after week because these represent safe and meaningful youth engagement and development opportunities. Our families encourage their youth to participate because we are their trusted community partners. They feel comfortable and confident sending their youth to us, knowing they'll be safe on a Friday night. For our youth, these pop-ups are opportunities to positively engage with each other in a safe and fun environment that embodies the framework of our city youth development and expresses those values and opportunities for them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Casper. I'm the co-founder and COO of Improve Your Tomorrow. And when it comes to Measure U funding, there's no better investment than investing into our youth, into our young people. And what I can assure you is that there has been a return on your investment pertaining to the youth pop-ups. We've had over 3,600 youth participate in youth pop-ups in February and March. And what I'm reminded of daily is that from our individuals that come from these underserved communities, how at a disadvantage they are. But I'm encouraged when I think about when we insert love and we insert motivation and exposure and resources, how these young people continually show up and show out and do the right things. So I encourage you, as you work towards finalizing the Measure U budget, let's just remember our youth and our neighborhoods that need you the most. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next
Good
speaker is Jackie
afternoon,
Rose,
Council,
then Deborah Cummings.
Mayor and City Council person. I want to first thank you, Councilmember Hanson, for bringing back hope to our neighborhoods who had lost it. And this shows that that hope is there. So I just want to thank you. Programs like Freedom Schools, thank you for that. Because we will not have Freedom Schools in South Sacramento this year because of budgetary issues with the school district. Things like the arts, which motivate our young people to be who they really are. Those kinds of things are really, really, truly important to our community. The inclusive community economic development for all of our underserved communities like Meadowview, and I want to make sure that we are talking about Meadowview, but we are also talking about all the neighborhoods that are underserved in this city. Because what I'm talking about when I talk about Freedom Schools and the arts, all of these neighborhoods need those types of things. So I want to thank you for that. Jobs for our kids, and I'm not just talking about jobs for those good kids. I'm talking about jobs for those kids that nobody wants to deal with. Those are the kinds of kids that need jobs. Okay? That's what's going to change our neighborhoods. Affordable housing. Our families are impacted by this housing issue. We need to make sure our families are housed as well, because it's not just a single individual, it's our families. And then entrepreneurship, really key. Teaching our youth not to work for somebody, but to work for themselves. Right. That is real key and important. So I want to thank all of you for your innovative and creativeness up here today. I don't come here very often, but I just want to thank you all for today, bringing forward a plan that's going to be inclusive for all of our neighborhoods. Thank you so much.
Jackie.
Next speaker is Deborah Cummings, then Cha Vang, then Barry Axius.
Axius.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Deborah Cummings, co-founder of Community Mothers of 9583815. I come to you today as though all of our other people in the background. I am a native of Del Paso Heights, and I still live in the community that I serve. I would like to say to you, in Del Paso Heights, where we have nothing positive for our children, but Hangenwood Park, where there is the only place that our community can go freely and hang out with barely small to few projects. I just want you guys to know, we in Del Paso Heights deserve local jobs for our community youth. We in Del Paso Heights deserve affordable housing in our community. Also, we deserve good investment that's going to give back in our community. We have had a lot of people say what they were going to do in Del Paso Heights. I am not here to blow smoke where it don't belong. What I am here to do is save a community that doesn't no one, and I repeat, no one give a damn about. I am standing here before you tired. I am standing before you here concerned about my community youth. My nephew just got released out of the state penitentiary doing 5 years. I am past my neck tired of trying to save. My family's on the line. And I need someone, be it whoever that be, make sure that we have some skin in the game in Del Paso Heights. And I thank you.
All right. Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor Steinberg, City Manager, and members of the City Council. My name is Chave, and I'm Executive Director for Hmong Innovating Politics. We're a grassroots organization that prioritizes civic engagement and community organizing. And as we're speaking, my team is out canvassing and phone banking around what the communities want in terms of investment. Before I go on, I also wanted to acknowledge that there was quite a few Hmong elders in the room, but because it went a little longer, they had to leave, and they were sitting in the front. They were here because they wanted to, many of them for the very first time, because they wanted to make sure that the Measure U revenues truly supported communities, the communities that they live in, but also supporting the next generation, because they know that they want to make sure that their futures are being invested in. So today we are actually standing with our fellow community members in the chamber to remind you all that while a lot of our community members cannot attend every single meeting, that because they're trying to survive day to day, that they are also, like, for you all they deserve to have a voice and be seen. And so I am challenging you all to expand your views of what public safety means. That includes inclusive community and economic development and affordable housing that a lot of our Southeast Asian community members take advantage of. And I just also wanted to emphasize that there's a wealth of community organizations in Sacramento, and we're very fortunate. And for you all to make sure that you utilize the resources that we have. For example, when we invest a little in the pop-ups, there's tremendous results that come out from it. And one of the examples is Haipu in District 2 that is doing great pop-ups to really invest in a safe environment for youth and youth
Thomas,
development.
your 2 minutes is complete. Thank you.
Last piece, sorry. And because they are doing these pop-ups, we want to make sure they are utilizing your services, right? Your resources to bring to the community. So I want to make sure that we highlight those great organizations. Thank you.
Partnership all the way.
Harry Axius, then Cassandra Jennings, and Pat Fong Kashida.
Mayor, council, thank you. I'm not going to thank you guys for anything yet because we haven't seen the money yet, so I'm going to leave my thank yous to the side. I'm more or less a person about the action. Mr. Chenier, we've been calling you about some business that we need to do in the summer, so I need you to check that email and make sure you sit down with me and my partner, Dana Maisha, because we need to talk.
What do you think of the direction here, Barry?
Huh?
Please tell us
we're
what
going
you
to
think.
speak. I just had to make sure he knows to answer the email. For the last 4 months, now this is just truth. The last 4 months, we've had successful partnership with the city, 120 youth. Community pop-ups has been happening throughout the city. We have at least 4,000 plus participants, 85% of those young people under 19, and 76% young people of color. We are talking about success with a small, minor investment. Now, what I'm saying is something that Alan Warren was speaking on, and I feel that we can no longer continue to think that we can talk about sustainable neighborhoods when we continue to have to beg for dollars to make those neighborhoods sustainable. We need something in concrete that will establish that we have something intentional. And with these pop-ups, if we've done a little and done a lot, imagine with a real investment what we can do. These young men are part of the pop-up. These young men were young men that could be at the mall causing chaos. But they said that they wanted to be a part of what? The change. So I say when we talk about budgeting, let's look at our budget and let's make sure we have a separate budget for the community pop-ups. Let's not throw it under youth development because this is a separate piece by itself. And we talk about public safety, this is our alternative to public safety. And we need to recognize that. And also recognize, I got 15 seconds, and also recognize that our young people, if we truly care about our young people of color, invest in them so they can be our change. Thank you guys very much.
Barry, Stay tuned for my letter later this week.
Oh, you got a
on the
little letter.
pop-ups. You got it. on the pop-ups.
Is it said Barry Axius? We got some?
It won't have your name in it, but
Okay.
it's okay.
Just voice to the youth.
Okay, go ahead.
Cassandra Jennings, then Pat Fonkashita, then Petula Burks.
Good afternoon, Mayor Steinberg and members of the City Council. My name is Cassandra Jennings, President and CEO of the Greater Sacramento Urban League. I really appreciate the discussion this afternoon, really trying to provide some details. I do have two basic comments about that I just like to caution you of. One is I hope that it continues to provide flexibility among the categories so that we can really be responsive to the neighborhoods. And then secondly, I don't want us to forget about the targeted and intentional approach we need to community development. Because as I'm reminded by Professor Manuel Pastor, who once said to me, is that your region and your city is as great as only as your weakest link. And I think the weakest link that we have right now is our communities that have been left behind, and the people that each and every day themselves are fighting barriers, inequities, and in underserved neighborhoods throughout their communities. So I think this is an opportunity that we really need to take to jumpstart our economy in the neighborhoods and look at it in a holistic way, in a holistic approach, that we need some of those catalyst activities that were already mentioned, like housing, like grocery stores, like office buildings, like rehab buildings and viable businesses, the large ones, the medium ones, and the small ones that can really provide jobs to our neighborhoods. I'm reminded that this morning when I drove into Del Paso Heights that there were 12 vacant lots in a 2-block area in Marysville and Grand, and yes, a lot more. And that community every day faces these lots month after month. They have been facing it for years. And I know that there are neighborhoods across this city that face the same thing and have their own stories. I think this is the opportunity that we really need to be intentional. We need to be targeted and focused as we look at all of this inclusive economic development. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. Pat Fonkashita, President and CEO of the Sacramento Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce and member of the Sacramento Inclusive Economic Development Collaborative. The collaborative, as you see behind me today, is made up of chambers of commerce and PBIDs, which was formed in 2018 in direct response to our support of Measure U, with the intent to advocate for priority neighborhood investments and ensuring that the promise of Measure U is kept. Many of us have read the Brookings Institute report commissioned by the City of Sacramento and participated in the meetings that were held in the city regarding priority neighborhoods. The findings confirmed what we all know, that unless intentional investment, strategies and pathways are created for our disadvantaged communities, income inequality and education inequality will continue to grow. Our city's ability to prosper, to increase its tax base, to grow jobs and businesses, and our city's ability to compete will decline. The promise of Measure U is a promise that this city will put equity and inclusion at the forefront of its thinking. That inclusion cuts across every aspect of economic development, from cluster building and talent attraction to quality of place and anchor-led development strategies. This cannot just trickle down from the top. It is the essential connection between growth and inclusion. Great cities are diverse communities, and prosperity is equally shared. In this city's population of 500,000 plus, 14% has identified as African American, 20% is Asian and Asian Pacific Islander, and 28% is Hispanic. 62% of our city's population is identified as minority. And yet, if you look at the city's median income of $54,000, rounding, white medium income is at $61,000, black is at $40,000, Hispanic is at $46,000, and our first immigrant API communities, Vietnamese, is at $29,000, and Hmong is at $39,000. Prosperity is not equally shared.
Thanks.
The Measure U commitment begins to address this prosperity gap.
Thank
We
you for your
urge
comments.
to
Your 2
thank
minutes
you
is complete.
for your commitment.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you very much, Pat.
Petula Burks, then Kathy Rodriguez, then Michael Mott.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Petula Burks. I'm representing the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. I promise I will try to be brief because a lot of my comments actually echo Pat's. As you know, GSEC is responsible for innovative growth strategies in the Greater Sacramento region. Part of being innovative is being aware of what is driving the economy and where our blind spots are. In order to identify our blind spots, we worked with partners to commission a detailed report from the Brookings Institute. In the initial institute, we lagged in the area of inclusion. Based on the very recent May 2019 report, we have dropped significantly in inclusion, moving from 84th to 91st. While we see a decrease in crime and an increase in prosperity in Sacramento, we are still leaving communities behind. When we look and think about creating an inclusive economy, we must begin to look at our communities as assets. Many of our communities have undervalued assets, which offer untapped business and development opportunities. Community economic development interventions can enhance market functioning in these neighborhoods, expanding investment and wealth creation. As we shift our approach from looking at communities from a deficit lens to an asset lens, inclusiveness can occur. Based on a Brookings report entitled Market-Based Community Economic Development, when the focus changes to the asset-based approach, several benefits surface, and here are just four. It focuses on the positive features of communities rather than perpetuating negative stereotypes. It recognizes that temporary services or even income, as important as they are, do not create the long-term wealth necessary to climb out of poverty. It reconnects left behind or undervalued communities to the mainstream rather than creating alternative programmatic solutions. I'm going to skip the last one because what I want to say is this. What we ask is that the council do the right thing. The best way I can sum this up is in a conversation about the waterfront. Someone on this day has said that the waterfront is the city's front porch. Coming from a very southern background, my grandmother taught me that the front porch should not be the only pretty thing in your home, but the entire home should match that front porch. Let's ensure that when we look at people at the city of Sacramento, that our entire city is growing together, prospering together, and that our entire home represents us all.
Thank you, Petula, for your comments. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Kathy Rodriguez, Michael Mott, and Corey DeRue.
Is that? Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Rodriguez, and I'm the President and CEO for the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And I'm also a member of the IEDC, the Inclusive Economic Development Collaborative that Pat referenced earlier. I have this whole thing that I was going to share with you, but quite honestly, after listening to the whole discussion, I'm leaving feeling much more heartened that we're going to do good work together. I want to thank Councilmember Steve Hansen for all his work and coming together and coming up with a solution, because I think all of us that work in organizations, we're tasked with that every day. What's the solution? What are you bringing together? What's the new idea? And for someone to think out of the box, that's very appreciated. I want to thank Councilmember Ashby for looking ahead to the people that are working right here in the city chambers. I think it's really important, and we often don't think about the people that are cleaning up after us when we leave the day. So I was really heartened by to hear you say that. And then Vice Mayor, there was something we wanted to applaud you about, and that was looking at procurement contracts, because in order for businesses to grow, they need opportunities and access, and so we would welcome the opportunity for city manager and everyone to look at the procurement opportunities that you have here at this city. Last summer, I was part of the trio. It was the Sacramento Asian Chamber, the Sacramento Black Chamber, and myself that helped actually launch the initiative at the press conference for Measure U. And we did that knowing that there was a risk involved for our communities, that maybe things wouldn't turn out the way they were supposed to. But our communities all said, our businesses, our members, we want this. We believe in it. We think that if there's an opportunity for our lives and communities to be better, we want that opportunity. All we're asking is that you, as your chamber, that you advocate for us and that you hold everyone accountable. So that's what you're seeing here today, and that's what you'll continue to see, that the leadership here is going to hold you accountable to do the right thing, to work with our communities, to work with our businesses. I have 20 seconds. Rachel Rios over La Familia has an opportunity center that they're going to build there. It is career development, it is workforce development. We as a chamber have already committed to space there, so we can also offer our small business technical assistance and education. That is a work of collaboration. That is what Measure U is going to be able to help us do. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kathy.
Michael Mott, Corey DeRue, then Tracy Shaw.
Hi, council members, neighbors. I am proud to stand here with the SAC IEDC Collective and Hacker Lab, where we get to see entrepreneurs and dreamers daily from underserved communities. Excuse me, I have a bit of a frog in my throat. I want to tell you about a 15-year-old high school student. I get to write the blog post for Hacker Lab, and this is one story that I got to write about. This 15-year-old has burns covering most of his body. He lost his hands in a fire, but he can code with his wrists, and well. He came to our Teen Tech Nights that Hacker Lab partnered with Comcast, SHRA, Code for Hood, and Urban League at Meadowview and CV Circle community centers. There we offered teen tech education, entrepreneurship training, and empowerment. Roy Matthews, who is our partner with SHRA and Urban League, says that at these sorts of events, we awaken the genius in each of them. Soon, other kids saw this student for more than his appearance and that he had value, and soon they were all calling on him to join their team for a coding project. We need Measure U funds to support this kind of work so that we can have STEM education at community centers, not just sports and other activities that happen now. Regardless of how you get there, Hacker Lab and IEDC urge you to invest in our underserved communities. Together we can awaken the genius in this whole city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Corey DeRue, then Tracy Shaw, then Kia Morton.
Good afternoon, City Council members, Mr. Mayor. My name is Corey DeRue. I'm the Executive Director for Florin Road Partnership, and we are members of the Sacramento Inclusive Economic Development Collaborative, mouthful. I'm here today to talk about Measure U. With the loss of state economic redevelopment funds, our city needs a fund to invest in catalyst projects. The Florin Road Partnership Board of Directors believes that we have just the Catalyst project that will not only reduce our city's debt, but will also expand our tax base by growing jobs and businesses in our neighborhood. The 2018 Urban Land Institute SACOG National Transit Oriented Development Project, say that 5 times fast, does just that by developing the regional transit parking lot at the Florin Station. Elevating the economy of our South Sacramento community also ultimately reduces the volume of city services needed to combat crime, homelessness, and more. Measure U funds come directly from the people who purchase locally and who expect these monies to flow back into their community. But we cannot do it alone. We need your help. It is the only way many of these catalyst projects will ever happen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, Council, as well as City Manager Chan. I'm Tracy Shaw, Executive Director for Power and Alliance, the PBID in the southeastern corner of the city. We are also home to an Opportunity Zone, adjacent to a Promise Zone, and a member of the Inclusive Economy Coalition. As a leader of the area's economic development efforts, I am here to discuss the importance of inclusive economic investments in our city's more disadvantaged communities. The Alliance area has long been the city's largest industrial corridor, driving tax revenue and providing manufacturing and other vocationally based employment for those who aren't pursuing the 4-year degree pathway. These jobs and these companies play a critical role for our residents and for our city. It is also important to note that areas like ours are often low on the priorities list when it comes to public investment. But the inclusive economy vision is the brightest possibility I've seen at elevating both the commercial corridor as well as the residents who live near them. An example of a catalytic project we've envisioned is the proposed California Mobility Center, which could be located in the Sacramento Center for Innovation. Our plan would be to use this marquee project to invigorate the area while utilizing workforce development and career pathways to engage residents from the adjacent neighborhoods. Please consider how we can have matching funds available to invest in projects like this and many more. They can be game changers for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Here's Keon Morton, and then Malachi Saku Amen.
Good afternoon, Kaim.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Kaim Morton, Sac Metro Chamber and Sac IEDC. First of all, just want to say very encouraged by the discussion that is happening here today and to see the new ideas and possible collaborations that's going to come forward. So overall, for the chamber. We're advocating for investment within our communities. Why? Because investment in our people and our businesses is important. You've heard about the Brookings report. Also want to add into that, there's a 2019 PPC report that talk on the economy of the state that reinforces that path and is letting us know why we need to prepare for the future. It reads, as California's economy approaches new heights, it is important to recognize that underlying disparities can limit long-term growth. The boom, bust, and recovery cycle typically widens disparities. We want and we need people to be able to participate in our economy, and for that they need jobs which provide them with discretionary income. Moreover, this can be seen in what we at the Chamber are looking at as kind of an ABC strategy. You've seen and you've heard various folks come up and talk about different projects that they have or gap financing that's need for projects. In an ABC kind of strategy, it's a city service community amenity strategy. It is a business ROI fiscal strategy, and it's a community benefit. Neither one can really work without the other. If you can get all three, then you're going to uplift the communities overall. As an example, if you're doing a business investment in projects that can create a fiscal ROI like a development, it can lead to housing, sustainable jobs, and new businesses. And lastly, again, just want to say we're very pleased with the direction and the discussion that the council has had today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Malachi Sekou Amen, and then Dr. Flojane Kofer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the council. I'm Malachi Amen, President of the California Urban Partnership, and we have a mission to build economic security in communities of color. And before the city adopted the Cannabis Equity Program, we were very much engaged in bringing together the neglected areas along with leaders and residents from those neglected areas, and we know where those areas are in town, to drive forward a design process where we could create our own jobs, we could create lasting wealth, and do that intentionally without someone else coming to colonize the economic development in Black and brown communities. And we see an opportunity for the investments that have come forth and are possible via the Measure U Commission. We see those investments as a great opportunity to create an economic base so that we're less dependent on city and government resources over time. And without that economic base, it will be problematic. And so, we just want to, encourage you that as the discussions go forward, of course, we thank you for the discussion, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Hanson, that, brings forth a solution. Obviously, we want to see the check. But at the end of the day, we're really looking forward to an opportunity to connect the neighborhoods to the regional economy and to participate as owners, because there is a 228-year racial wealth gap that we're looking at if we don't do something intentional. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Speaker is Dr. Flojane Kofer, then Chris Greeny, then Bob Ward.
Dr. Kofer? We'll call the next speaker.
Chris Greeny, then Bob Ward, then Pastor Tamara Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Chris Greeny. I am the president of the Sacramento and Sierra Building Trades Council, employing members here in Sacramento. But what I'm here to talk about today is potential. It's about employee careers. We look forward to working with the mayor, council, and manager to ensure we invest in workforce development locally. We're looking for the provision of pathways to high-wage jobs, which includes not limited to jobs in the trades, but also jobs as it comes. Providing opportunities in apprenticeship training. There's a need in Sacramento for workers and skilled workers, and I know that there's a need for jobs, and I think that this will bring everything together in fruition as far as opportunities for career pathways for the community. This will definitely improve lives and prosperity for the community career paths. We need to invest our people in our people and in our workforce. Thank you very much for your hard work and investment in this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Bob Ward, then Pastor Tamara Bennett.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Bob Ward, business manager of IBEW Local 340 here in Sacramento. I'm here today to urge you to support including the civic and community benefit projects in the Measure U priorities. IBEW Local 340 enthusiastically supported Measure U. We believe it was the right path for the city of Sacramento to take. Investing in our community is a policy our own local has practiced for many years, providing scoreboards for baseball fields, rewiring an underground music venue. It's about providing places for the community. Many of our members work and live in the city of Sacramento. We understand that the growing city needs to provide unique amenities for its visitors and most importantly for its residents, including projects in the budget that will benefit the community, ensure inclusive economic development, and create high-wage jobs is critical for Sacramento to sustain the renaissance we're experiencing. I strongly urge you to consider these priorities when voting to approve this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
City Council and Mayor, my name is Pastor Tamara Bennett, and first I just want to say thank you. Thank you for definitely you, Hanson, I appreciate you for bringing a budget for our young people. I'm kind of just looking at this whole thing from a native Detroiter who was raised in the inner city of Detroit. I have very close ties to friends in Chicago and New York and other cities that are also suffering with the young people and with the economical challenges. And I think I just want to encourage our city council to understand the power that you have to make and continue to make the investments in our young people so that we don't end up like Chicago, and so that our youth do not end up like other cities. Last year's program that was invested in the summer allowed no murders in Sacramento for our young people, which was phenomenal. So that is, to me, that's what's the most important, is that the pop-ups are allowing for a safe area, that we have our children, so that Sacramento does not become like Chicago and other cities. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your investment into our youth.
Thank you, Pastor.
Next speaker is Kaylin Wright, then Fabrizio Sazzo, then Kevin Carter.
Good afternoon, Council. Kaylin Wright on behalf of the 1,700 members of the Sacramento Association of Realtors here today. Thank you all for all of your time and discussion around this very, very important issue. We understand that there's many decisions to be made around the Measure U revenue. And there's a lot of discussion to be had about the best allocation of resources. Thank you all for all of the time and commitment you're putting into this. The Sacramento Association of Realtors highly recommends that the council designate some portion of this money to affordable housing. This is so incredibly important. Thank you, Councilmember Hanson. Your proposal for $100 million is incredibly encouraging. We're so excited to see that. Since 2013, only 345 new affordable deed-restricted units have been developed in the city of Sacramento. That is a huge problem. To keep pace with growth and to meet housing goals set by the state of California, we need to construct 8,411 new units by 2021. This is a huge demand. And to keep up with the renaissance that our city is experiencing and the rising that we're seeing, housing is becoming an essential city service, and so we really encourage everyone on the council to include the proposal that Councilmember Hanson has put forward today. Thank you all.
Thank you for your comments.
I have 24 more speakers. Next is Fabrizio Sazzo, Kevin Carter, then Rosario Ramirez.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, council members. Fabrizio Sasso at the Sacramento Central Labor Council. Just want to let you know that we had some janitors lined up today to talk about the contract, renewing the contract, and they had to leave because they had to go to work. And I want to thank council members Ashby and Guerra for their comments in support of the janitorial workers here. You know, when we went and entered into this contract back in 2015, there were 76 positions, and of those that remained after the first year, only 30 of those workers remained. And you ask yourself why. Well, there's some workplace safety issues. There's reduction in pay and healthcare benefits, and so they leave. And their workload has increased per worker, so they're overworked. And this is the result of low bidding, accepting low bids. And now we have caveat emptor, buyer beware, and this is the result. And so I'm glad that we're talking about revisiting the living wage because this is vitally important, especially if we're looking at equity all across the city. Start with our house first. And I think we should extend it and apply it to all the organizations and different groups that are planning on receiving this type of inclusive economic development to ensure that the money that they're spending, money in a wise way that promotes good paying jobs. And we hope that you do not extend the contract for a year. That we open it up to responsible bidders this time around and take a look at and revisit this living wage ordinance, and we're happy to work with you all on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Kevin Carter, Rosario Ramirez, then Leonor Chihuahua.
Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Brother Kevin Carter. I'm with the California Poor People's Campaign. We were looking at your budget, and I want to say that the California Poor People's Campaign, we don't agree with your budget. The numbers when it comes to housing here in the city of Sacramento, as we have reviewed here in Sacramento, the areas when it comes to impacted communities, just recently in Stockton Boulevard, over 300 homeless people that has been displaced. And in this budget that you have, the numbers are off by $1 million or probably more. The numbers that you have is like Dr. King would say, it's like flinging a coin to a beggar. Its emphasis only creates a beggar. And by saying that, because of the cost of living and increases, and when we talk about mental health and all of these things of the capacity that affects the homeless and the crisis that we're dealing with now and the fierce urgency of now in this city, those numbers could never come to the capacity in reaching this budget that you have. And we urge you to go back to the table and remember to fight poverty, not the poor, because this is exactly what you're doing. You're fighting the poor people, not poverty. These numbers that you have that are on with this $40 million budget, the $40 million is not enough. You guys have to come up a little higher when it comes to poverty in this city. And it's not just this city. It's all over this state. I've been through this state. And we did entire research. I'm on my way to Washington, D.C. in June to talk to the Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosario Ramirez. I work for SEIU USWW, the janitors. Yes, they had to go because they had to work. And we're here today because we're really concerned about the extension of the janitorial contract to Lincoln Training Center and Crossroads. Since we've been here for so long, since the 90s, every time irresponsible contractors take over, we call them union buildings around the Sacramento area, the workers lose their benefits and their jobs. And these irresponsible contractors refuse to recognize their union and their benefits. SEIU USWW is committed to ensure that janitors in Sacramento have respect, a good job, and will help them raise their families here in the city. We're asking the city members, which I'm really thankful because you guys are moving this forward, which is to stop the extension for these contractors, but also open to responsible contractors. Thank you for Ms. Blue Jacket, I forgot her name. Thank you for passing around. But we'll give you all a list of very, very responsible contractors that provide healthcare coverage to the members with no pay at all. The employers pay for everything, not the janitors, the employers. And so we want to make sure that you guys take a look at it. And we also would love to schedule a meeting with all of you, but also have a couple of questions for you. Since I only have 34 seconds left, I want to know why Crossroads has a different process than Lincoln Training in terms of moving forward. I want to know who's the point person for that. And I want to let you know also, thank you, Councilwoman Ashby, for bringing that, and Council Member Eric Guerra, because we're working already with you on creating a policy for responsible contractors. Why? Because we're really concerned, and because it's not okay that our janitors come after all, you go home and see your families, and they're here at night working really hard, and they're not being respected, and not even have healthcare coverage for themselves and for their families. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rosario, for your comments.
I hear some people have left. I have Leonore Chihuahua, Noah Painter, Azzy Yousefi, Julie Spezia. Any of those?
So we have Mr. Painter is walking down, and I think we've got some other folks here.
Mr. Painter?
Feel free to come to the podium. No.
Good afternoon, council members, Mr. Mayor. My name is Noah Painter. I work on affordable housing projects here in the city of Sacramento. Just want to call to attention to Councilmember Hansen's proposal. $100 million towards affordable housing will go a very, very long way towards producing meaningful housing in the city. Echoing Kaylin Wright's conversation or statement about the amount of deed restricted units that have been produced in the city of Sacramento, we are woefully under that. It's nobody's fault except the fact we don't have funds. We don't have the money to build the housing. So I just want to echo this and thank everyone for considering taking Councilmember Hansen's proposal into consideration, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Painter.
I have Leonore Chihuahua, Azzy Yousefi, Julie Spezia. Ozzy's next. Thanks.
Hi, members of the council, Mayor Steinberg. I'm Azzy Yousefi here on behalf of CFY Development. Also, in the spirit of my husband, Ali Yousefi, here to voice my support for the very encouraging $100 million proposed for affordable housing. It's highly necessary, and I hope that in Ali's spirit, as you all know, he'd be front of the line here to voice his support and encouragement for this budget. So I wanted to be here to echo that for him, and on behalf of the community themselves, because we all know we need it. So thank you.
Ozzy, I think he would also be happy about the arts money.
He'd be pretty stoked about the arts money today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah.
Julie Spezia, then Annalisa Cleveland, then Black Zebra Project.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Spezia, and I'm a resident of New Era Park, and I voted for Measure U because I wanted more affordable homes. And I'm particularly interested because I'm a member of the Sacramento Housing Alliance, and I know from reading their newsletters that what I see with my eyes, which is that homelessness is just increasing everywhere I go in Sacramento. And it's especially increasing for the disabled and the elderly and for families. I'm also a member of St. John's Lutheran Church, and we serve men, women, and children who are impacted by the rising cost of rent. And I speak also today for Tina Reynolds. She was sitting next to me, but she had to leave, and she's my across-the-street neighbor. And she was telling me a story that I wasn't aware of. I love our neighborhood, and so does she, in part because we have duplexes, apartments, some of which are Section 8, cottages, and million-dollar homes all next to each other on the same block. And it creates a really vibrant and interesting neighborhood. But the apartments in our neighborhood that used to rent for $725 a month now rent for $1,750 a month. And we're losing some of our neighbors, and it's not okay. And so I'm here today to ask you to look at that $100 million, which is fantastic, as a down payment, because it also takes the political will to zone for housing and to increase density, and it also takes the political will to put housing where some of the neighbors are saying no, because we need it in all of our neighborhoods, and you can come to our neighborhood and see how great it can look. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Annalisa Cleveland, then Black Zebra Project, then Scarlett Amick. Annalisa, Black Zebra Project, no. Scarlett Amick, no movement. Crystal Sanchez, then Wanda Cleveland. Crystal here? Thank you. So Crystal Sanchez, Wanda Cleveland, then Jade Nicole.
Hi there. My name is Crystal Sanchez. I'm an active member of Poor People's Campaign, Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee, the Sacramento Tenants Union, Reckless Charity, Kappa Alpha Sigma, Criminal Justice National Association, and an advocate for our unhomed population. We are here regarding the Measure U budget, the homeless and affordable housing. We need to see the validity of this situation. Right now, we do not have viable resources or protections for our poor people. This has put us in a crisis. Homelessness is the crisis, not the unhomed. This is a dangerous economic game with nowhere to go. The homeless are classified and discriminated against as a whole. This is not the case. People are victims of circumstances out there. They're victims of domestic violence, slumlords, job loss, natural disaster, and poverty. Most of us are just one paycheck away from this fate. I can testify to that as I serve hundreds a week. We have many portfolios throughout the years for homelessness and housing solutions. Most resources for the people have been this voucher system. The vouchers do not match the physical resources that we need. In 2017, the point-in-time count in California stated we have 139,000 homeless and 3,665 here in Sacramento. It has drastically increased. The city of Sacramento is listed as absentee owner on hundreds of vacant parcels. Again, homelessness is the crisis that is also causing health and environmental crises. I'm about solutions. So a temporary solution to look into, I've been down to Modesto to the tent city. It is very successful as a temporary solution. Long-term, we need to build affordable housing on these vacant lots. When people have basic life necessities like showers, sleep, and a safe space, they have an increase of chance of jobs, school, and success. Measure U should be invested in our most vulnerable to create affordable housing.
Your 2 minutes is complete. Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Wanda Cleveland,
Thank
Jade
you for your
Nicole,
comments.
then Howard Lawrence.
All I have to say about this right now is I'm hoping that what you guys are claiming is going to go there. There's far too many homeless out there. I was there at Stockton Boulevard when the police drove up and removed several hundred people from a place that had been brought there by the police for many years. Measure U could help many of them and many more that will be out there. But we need to solve a problem with police brutality, because they're not being, they're applying, taking a stance against us advocates out there and trying to criminalize us too.
Thank you for your comments.
Jade Nicole, then Howard Lawrence.
Hi, my name's Jade. I'm with Magnum Opus Talent Magazines and Help Fight Poverty. Last week was our final week in downtown. I'm a little bit disappointed because a lot of the things that we'd been working on the last 10 years is what's being discussed in Measure U. And I feel like the community that helped start this movement with helping the poor, with providing economic development to low-income communities, we're going to be excluded from this. My partner, Deepak Sharma, 14 years ago, when he first came to Sacramento, he was located right next to Loaves and Fishes. At that time, he was trying to provide jobs to the homeless and poor. The whole entire time that we were in downtown, we were excluded from paid opportunities from our community. Any work that we've done over the last 10 years to Sacramento, we haven't been paid. And I find that extremely disappointed when we have a solution to where we could bring hundreds of jobs to Sacramento, but we're not even being given a chance to contribute. And if this is what we're going through in downtown, I can't imagine what people are going through in low-income communities. I'd like to be involved in some of the discussions with providing jobs and also being able to help some of the issues with the homeless community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Howard Lawrence, then Ramona Landeros, then Araceli Castaños.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor Guerrera, Mayor Steinberg, members of the council. My name is Howard Lawrence, and I'm a leader with Sacramento Area Congregations Together, which, as you know, is a faith-based community organizing network located here in Sacramento. So what I want to say to you this afternoon is that we need to see our budget as a plan to invest in our community. The health, talent, and energy of our population is the major source of economic growth for Sacramento. But without an increasing our supply of affordable housing, we are not going to attract the numbers needed to sustain our economic growth. We know the state has housing money in the pipeline. We need to have a local match to bring that money to Sacramento. Setting aside a portion of Measure U funds to create housing is a sound economic investment. And it's a way to grow Measure U funds because of increasing our economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Do I have 10 more speakers? The next is Ramona Landeros, Araceli Castillos, Holly Wonder Styles. Is Ramona here? No, it's Ramona. Araceli Castaños, Holly Wonder Styles. Following Holly is Bill Paveo, then Kathy Cresswell.
Good afternoon, Holly.
Good afternoon, Council and Vice Mayor and the Mayor. I'm Holly Wonder. I'm with Mutual Housing California, a nonprofit housing developer here in Sacramento. When Sacramento voters passed Measure U, they handed the City Council an opportunity to go beyond business as usual in addressing some critical local issues. And we all know that the severe shortage of affordable housing is not just a critical issue, but a crisis situation, one that will continue to threaten all other community goals until we take significant action to create new housing. We all know that the opportunity to address this situation was the inspiration for many voters who voted yes on Measure U. We urge the Council to take full advantage of this moment. We fully endorse the proposal to create a housing bond from Measure U funds. And when it comes to housing, the city needs to think big. So while $100 million in the first 2 years is a good start, that amount still needs to grow. Consider that with $200 million, the local affordable housing community estimates that we could leverage state resources to create as many as 3,300 new homes for Sacramentans currently shut out of the rental housing market. Even that is only a sliver of the local need. Speaking of need, we would propose that 1/2 of the available housing funds should be reserved for those with the greatest need, those with extremely low incomes, or those who are homeless people whose lives can be changed with permanent supportive housing. Help us maximize the ability to bring state funds to Sacramento. Help us compete with other California cities that have issued $900 million or $1.2 million housing bonds.
Thank you for your
Debt
comments.
service does need to be considered with eyes wide open, but in this case, it will be a catalytic
Your 2 minutes
investment
is complete.
with a
Thank you so much.
clean repayment source.
Thank you, Holly.
It will be
My next speaker is Bill Paveo, then Kathy Cresswell.
Holly, thank you very much, and you can leave your comments also with the clerk.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Paveo, Kathy Cresswell, Kyle Cooper.
Bill Paveo had to leave. So, good afternoon, Council. I'm with the Sacramento Housing Alliance, and I first want to say that we stand in solidarity with all of our allies in yellow. I want to thank the mayor for his leadership in getting us to the discussion that we are actually having today. We wouldn't be having it but for your push and leadership. I also want to thank Councilman Hanson for his specific proposal of dedicating $100 million to affordable housing. We are really appreciative of that, and we know that we need that kind of investment. We're here today to advocate that the city use Measure U funds to fundamentally change the way that business works in this city, that the city must change in the way that it invests in its people and in its neighborhoods. And Measure U gives us, for the first time ever, a real opportunity to do that. But the housing crisis demands that we have a response that is comparable to the need. And as we mentioned last week in new reporting from the California Housing Partnership, our needs have increased dramatically in just a year. Renters in Sacramento need to earn $28 an hour to be able to afford the median priced rent. That's twice the minimum wage. And so those workers that we're talking about that are in the city that are getting paid an average wage aren't even making enough to be able to afford the median rent. So we need affordable housing for the workers of this city as well as for the other people in this city. We need to build more affordable homes now, and bonding and getting us at least $100 million would be a great start for doing that. And we need it because we will not be able to leverage the dollars that are available from the state unless we do that. That's the way that we can get those critical resources. SHA has prepared a proposal that we are really excited to be able to talk to you about how we think we can use those funds and leverage them. But our neighborhoods, renters, and people in this community cannot afford to wait. Homeless people cannot afford to wait, and they shouldn't have to. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Next speaker is Kyle Cooper. Next speaker is Kyle Cooper, Rachel Iskow, Rachel Smith, Chrysanth Giles, then LaShonda Barker.
Okay, I'm nervous. Anyways, so in the homeless world, you know, let's face it, it's kind of hard to look at somebody wearing a backpack, holding a sleeping bag, to hire them, even though they're fully capable of work. The thing is not everyone's willing to hire them. That's not fair. I was homeless for 7 years on and off, and I learned how to be self-sufficient. There's a lot of people in this room right now wearing suits and ties that probably never pitched a tent before, or never had to anyways. So to basically define people in the homeless world as drug addicts and whatnot really is not logical when there's people who have their houses burnt down and now they're classified into the homeless world. So I'm really here to make a statement. I'm sorry I'm not very smart, but I got a lot of street smarts, and I just wanted to spread my peace of mind, stating that if we gave some homeless people a chance, you'd see what they're really made up of. Because honestly, I could be one of you any day.
Thank you for your comments.
Let's see, I have 4 more speakers, Rachel Iskow, Rachel Smith, Chrysanth Giles, and LaShonda Barker.
Hello, I'm Rachel Iskow. I live in District 5. I'm from the Sacramento Housing Alliance, the interim executive director. As you know, the Sacramento Housing Alliance represents local and regional organizations and individuals concerned about the high and rising cost of housing. A recent report revealed that 63,000 low-income households in Sacramento County and City still lack an affordable place to live. The Sacramento Housing Alliance stands with advocates of the city's low-resource and vulnerable neighborhoods and calling for equitable neighborhood development. And we caution that neighborhood development without a neighborhood stability plan will lead to gentrification and displacement of families. We must not build up neighborhoods without building affordable housing. We appreciate Councilmember Hanson's proposal to create a $100 million fund for affordable housing and hope that at least half of that can be used for affordable housing for the lowest resource households, those with incomes below 30% of area median income. We also hope that $100 million is a starting point and that we can work to increase that amount. Without more, we will be leaving more millions of dollars of state dollars that we can leverage for affordable housing. We're leaving that on the table. We're leaving that to other communities to access. It would be irresponsible to tell affordable housing developers that they can't develop badly needed housing in our neighborhoods because we lack the local funds to attract and leverage state funds that are available now and the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
3 speakers left: Rachel Smith, Krizanne Giles, LaShonda Barker.
Yes.
I don't see Rachel Smith, Krizanne Giles, and then LaShonda Barker.
Hi, I already had filled out a card. Did it not get in, or? We can split time, because I won't go a full 3. Hi, thank you. Krizanne Giles, North State Building Industry Association. I want to appreciate the mayor and the council for the opportunity to speak on this item tonight. The North State BIA continues to support Measure U. We feel this is a unique opportunity to address the lack of housing here in Sacramento. Local funds, such as those provided by Measure U, are critically important to us as the government and industry work together to solve this housing crisis. We've not had time to fully explore the concept issues of selling bonds to front-load Measure U funding. However, we're very interested in the compromise that Councilmember Hansen brought forward this evening and look forward to the detailed staff analysis before we dig into this next week. We're especially appreciative of the $100 million for gap funding for affordable housing. We thank you for your good work.
Artie Zahadani with St. Anton Community is also very active in the BIA. I can tell you we have some of the most active affordable housing projects in the state. We had the largest allocation in the state a couple of weeks ago with a $70 million affordable housing project in Santa Clara. We own a number of parcels in prime Sacramento locations that are vacant, undeveloped parcels now solely because there is not that gap funding available for affordable housing. Tax credit pricing has gone up, which is great news. The other source, which is tax-exempt bond financing, where we go out and attain bonds to help finance the project, the pricing has gone down. So those are the 2 key sources. The final source is that gap. And Councilmember Hansen, I'm really pleased with your aggressive position this evening. It's taking one step ahead of everybody else in the region. We're opening up a project in Folsom this week, one in one in Fremont in about 2 months, and one in Sunnyvale in about 6 months. And it'll be good to come back home thanks to your forward thinking and everybody's support. We're about 3 blocks away from here, so we'll count on us as a resource if you have any questions as the project gets developed. But finally, with my last 10 seconds, when you do have the monies in hand, the most successful communities with these types of trust funds are those who have real, transparent, and expeditious review. So if there's a project that makes sense, you apply and you hear right away. Thank you for your time.
Last speaker is LaShonda Barker.
Hello, my name's LaShonda Barker. I sit on the board with Sacramento Housing Alliance. I'm also on the board for North Sacramento Heart. And my day job, I used to be a social worker. I've worked in our community for quite some time. What we know right now is we're in a housing crisis. So when I get a crisis, that a call comes to me, I operate and I act quickly. And so the money, thank you, Councilmember Hansen, thank you, Mayor, thank all of you for the efforts, but it's a crisis. For what we need is affordable housing. We need housing that people can afford on the wages that they receive. The youth, economics, all that is important, but housing is the key. That's going to be the foundation. So I encourage you, as you invest, look at investing more into affordable housing. Housing where people can afford to pay rent, or else you're going to have more problems with our homeless out on the streets. And understand, as they're out on the streets, we're dealing with more mental illness, not just with folks that are on drugs, but families with children who are growing up in an environment where they're sleeping outside or in cars. It is very important that you invest more money into affordable housing. As we look to the future, economically, we have all these people with degrees, planning, urban planning, rural planning. Where are they to develop the housing that we need? We need the money, and we need you guys to invest in more. I know it's always everybody wants more money towards affordable housing. Thank you.
All right, that is the testimony. Well, in my opinion, the last speaker summed it up, because that's what, in large part, what this Measure U campaign was about. And I appreciate everybody who came out today to testify and to give voice to the vision and to the idea, again, put into a really, I think, helpful and impressive structure by Councilmember Hanson, the idea that it is necessary to actually capitalize on some of this money if we're going to address the plight of people who have no place to live or can't afford where to live, much less investing in our commercial corridors and all of the other things that we need to do for and with our communities. We are going to continue, without objection, items 2 and 3 to June the 4th at 5 o'clock. I'm sorry to the SHRA team that I know has been waiting. I apologize. Just went a little later, but we'll pick it up next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And in the meantime, we will recess until the
just one comment. Yes. It looks like the action plan number 3 is sort of pro forma. I don't know if we need a presentation, but we could. No?
I think we need to wait.
All right,
they may be tied together here. Okay, we're going to adjourn this meeting, and we're going to resume in 15 minutes at 5 o'clock. Thank you all very much.